Hello, and welcome to the Love What You Do podcast. I'm Rob Cunyo. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of FutureU Coaching, and I'm passionate about helping people find the career they love. In this podcast series, I'll interview professionals who have overcome all sorts of challenges to find their dream career. My hope is that by sharing their stories, you'll feel like you're part of a like-minded community of people who seek a happy work life. Sometimes we will also present special guests with advice and expert tips on how you can grow your career. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Today I'm joined by Nick Waters from Loop Recruitment, and we're exploring some of the myths and truths about how recruiters find and refer their ideal candidates. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and your experience in the recruiting game?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. So my elevator pitch, or how we present, is I'm a father of two. I'm a big family man. I come from a large family. I'm a country boy that found its way into recruitment. Lover of all sports. Love socialising, which has probably drawn me into recruitment. But like anyone who ends up in their end career, I'm not sure you start there or you plan for it, but it just came about. My business is Loop Recruitment. We are a specialist supply chain, operations, engineering and manufacturing business. White collar. Effectively, we're not an executive search function, so we focus on anything between supervisor level up to general management. I've been in recruitment for 7 years. Before that, I was in a property background, property valuation actually. So started as an introvert, realised I'm not an introvert, and then have gone over to sales and then into recruitment. But recruitment's just a people game. And that's what our business is focused on, effectively.
Great answer. Fantastic to hear that you've had a whole wealth of experience before actually ending up in recruitment. The recruitment market that you play in actually matches a lot of my clients, so this will be very, very valuable information for them. So let's get started. The question I get asked often by my clients is, how do recruiters find their ideal candidate for their clients? So how does it happen?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. It's one of those ones where, the question's complicated, but the answer is simple. But before we get to that, how you operate in as a recruiter day to day probably goes back to what your business values and how you've set up the business. So at Loop, we have 4 things that we follow religiously. And it all ties back into one thing, that we think business has been done the right way for 2,000 years and will be continued to be done the right way for the next 1 million years. In person, having a chat, getting to know someone, building a context, building a relationship. So we go back and we draw that on authenticity, communication, simplicity and fun. What we do isn't rocket science. We meet really great clients, we meet really great candidates, and we try and put them together. We use all the technology that's available, but there's nothing like having a conversation. There's nothing like building a relationship. There's nothing like finding out about someone, So that's what we try to focus on, getting to know the person and really just calling a spade, because rightly or wrongly, a lot of people have had a bad recruitment experience. There's a lot of bad recruiters out there. I worked at a multinational, which was, volume. Worked for a smaller business, which was, do whatever you could to get the fee, but was a bit more relationship based. But each has its positive and negative, but the constant is the candidate feels what the positive and the negative is. So, we're all about trying to change that dynamic and try and give everyone a proper experience where, you may not like it, but you might respect us for it afterwards. And I think that's what candidates want. They just want to know where they stand. Is this a live job? Am I right for this job? If I'm not right for it, how can I get better? What's my profile looking like? I mean, how many times do you change jobs in a lifetime? It could be 20, it could be 5, it could be 2. You know, we have some senior people that have been in organisations for 20 years that get tapped on the shoulder, or their boss moves to another organisation, gets tapped on the shoulder. So it's quite an anxious activity to put yourself out there, be vulnerable, and go and meet with someone to talk about your experience. I mean, if you were to say to 10 people who wants to talk about themselves for an hour, you know, everyone would run for the hills, you know, because it's that, you know, it's that putting yourself out there thing. So we try and strip it right back and you know, bring some real clarity to why the catch-ups, and is it the job? Is it you can get better? Is it something that we can advise that will help moving forward?
Something you said in there that was really interesting was about the live jobs. What does that mean? You said, is this a live job? Can you just
Yeah, so recruitment agencies and recruitment businesses, it's a sales business. So everyone's out there trying to get work. So, you know, for example, we here at Loop only work with roles that we're retained or exclusive on. So you can look on the website now and it'll be Nick Waters is partnering with Minor Figures, which is a coffee company, or Nick Waters is partnering with George Weston Foods. That doesn't happen across the recruitment landscape. It's a bit of if I get a good candidate, I can email them into, you know, the guys over at Coles, and then they might like the look of it, and then that's how I can get engagement that way, rather than building the relationship with the client, finding out what they're after, and taking a clear message to the market. So I think that's where a lot of people have a bad experience with, because, you know, recruiters will grab your CV and go, yeah, I'll send it to my database. But what does that mean? Who are these people? Do you have a relationship with them? And that's, you know, that goes back to the engagement piece with the recruiter. You know, and if you have a relationship with a recruiter, you need to, because we cover the market, but you know, like they're interviewing you need to interview them. It's really, really important.
Most of the people that I coach and people that I speak to in industry say to me, quote, "I hope my profile gets noticed by a recruiter." Is this the right approach for someone looking to change jobs, or is there a better way?
Yeah, you need to get noticed. You know, you need to put yourself out there. I don't know anyone who you know, gets a job just sitting waiting for someone to notice you and say, hey, you know, you seem like the type of person we need. Come over here and I'll talk to you. Of course, you've got to put yourself out there.
So how do they get noticed?
By finding out who's relevant in their industry, by being proactive, by networking, by meeting with recruiters, by making sure your LinkedIn is the best it can be. Because that's it. You've got to, you know, when you're going into the job market, you can only be you. You don't want to be anyone else. But you can be, you know, a good version of you, you know, or you can come in on Monday hungover after a big weekend to be the worst version of you. It's the same with how you present yourself to the market. You know, I always say to candidates, it's you who get the job. You know, people say, oh, why do you like recruitment? And, you know, a lot of the answers are like, oh, you get to mould people's careers. Well, I don't mould anyone's careers. I help facilitate a great move for them that they'll be happy with, but it's you at the end of the day that drives that. You know, we're just the conduit, the support, and, you know, that's great. It's really exciting, and it's a good part of the job. But we just try to bring out the best version of you that can match with the client.
So, I mean, a lot of people just rely on Seek or Jora or some other job board. Can you expand a little bit on a simple question, recruiter versus solely using a job board? What are the advantages of using a recruiter?
Yeah, well, the recruiter's in the market 24/7. So whether they're, you know, as I said, look, you know, a lot of people have got aspersions about recruitment consultants, and that's you know, that's there for a reason, but it's a necessary evil. I think if you're a candidate, recruiters use recruiters, ironically enough. Rec to recs are a huge business in our market, you know. So we use them in our last business, we use them at the first business, you know, we probably have to use them in this business. So you just need them because they're just that conduit to the market. Now, how do you find a good one versus a bad one? That's probably where, you've got to go and catch up with them, meet them. And when I said it before, you've got to interview them as well. How long have you been in the market for, Mr. Recruiter? Who are your clients? Tell me about some of the similar profiles that you've helped. What are you seeing in the industry? If you can start having a discussion and they can start giving you some real tangible information back, you're on a good one. I'd also say, go in there with your expectations, going that, like anything, you're going to get a good one and a bad one. But in terms of capturing what's in the market, very important. Because, if you look at Seek right now, type in supply chain manager, you get a lot of generic ads. So you won't actually know who the actual client is. It might be, it's an industrial manufacturer or FMCG business or retail business. So going and speaking to Mr. Recruiter is very important. And it's an important part of the process. Once, it gives you training as well, because you treat it like an interview with a client. You dust off the cobwebs, sharpen up the skills, ask for feedback, take the feedback, don't be offended by the feedback. When you're getting feedback from a recruiter, it's normally a really good thing because they want to work with you. They see there's enough talent to match to the market. But, everyone's different.
They often say that if someone is asking you questions in return, then that's a really powerful sign of interest. So what you're saying is that if a recruiter is pushing you and stretching you to improve your CV or improve how you present, then that should be taken as a positive sign, not an insult.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you become a team. So people is an interesting commodity to deal with because they've got their own mind, they've got their own thoughts, they've got their own families, they've got their own pressures, they've got their own stresses, they've got their own ambitions. And as I said, we just want to facilitate and bring the best out of people. But if I put my business hat on and my recruiter hat on, if you're out going for a job, I want you to be the best because you're representing us and our brand in the market. So that's what I say. It becomes a team.
Yep.
And that's the best relationships you have when you are teaming towards a goal.
So the obvious question is, how does a person find the right recruiter and how do they build that relationship?
Just takes time. Candidates become clients, clients become candidates. One thing that happens with recruiters and candidates is, they're hot, and then you go on the client side and they're not, because you don't need it. So you just want to play the long game, play the smart game. You want to know who's relevant in your industry. So talk to your peers, talk to your superiors, talk to anyone in your team that's had a good experience. It's a small world. Whatever industry you're in, say in Melbourne, it's a very small world. And someone knows someone, and someone's had an experience with someone, someone's had a bad experience with someone. So, you need to start there. You need to start researching, okay, does this recruiter put up, transparent ads? I.e., do they talk about the clients they're working with, or do they put up a heap of blind generic ads? When you meet with the recruiter, they're asking you about your CV. Why don't you ask them about theirs? Again, as I said, be transparent. Who do you work with? What are you seeing in the market? Because if you're in the market, you'll know whether they've got credibility or not. And you just got to go with your gut. Like recruiters go with the candidates' gut. You go, they're really good. There's something about them. I'm really bought in, and I think they're authentic, and they've got a good attitude. It's the same with you with the recruiter.
Yep.
You might meet 5 candidates. 3 might be really good. 1 might be very rude. 1 might be okay with potential that you need to invest some time in. It's the same with recruiters. You might meet 5 recruiters. I'd be astounded if you thought all 5 were good, and all 5 are going to be different.
So the long game. So one of the things that my clients tell me is, I hate my job, I want to quit, which is probably the worst thing you can do. Finding a job when you're unemployed is way harder than finding a job while you're employed. So, but those same people connect with recruiters at that point. Is that too late? Should they have probably done, as you said, the long game, started earlier, started the networking process just in case?
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's much easier to find a job when you're in a job, rightly or wrongly. It is. And I think it comes back to the psyche as well, that, you know, sometimes when we see people that are immediately available, and not all, but they can, you know, the way you present yourself can come across. I can start on Monday, where you're in a job and you're not playing it cool, but it's just letting it take its process. And that's good. It gives you time to breathe, them time to assess. They want you to assess. You know, it's a two-way market at the moment. It's not the days where, you know, a client just sits there at a candidate and goes, yeah, okay, you start Monday. You know, as I said, I keep going. It's a two-way interview. It's a two-way process.
I'm often amazed at how poorly understood LinkedIn is by many professionals. It seems like so many people just don't know how to use LinkedIn or don't know how to optimize it. What does a powerful LinkedIn profile look like to a recruiter?
So, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. When it first came out, everyone said it's going to be the death of the recruitment industry. Well, no, it's just given recruiters access to the biggest database in the world. You know, information isn't king anymore. Information's everywhere.
Yeah.
And all the recruiters, we pay for the top LinkedIn accounts. It's at probably our biggest cost, but it's well worth it. So, having said that, if that's our biggest searching tool, naturally, if you're a candidate and you want to get noticed, first and foremost, you need to have a LinkedIn account. I know it sounds silly, but a lot of people have got an ideal or aspersion that says, hey, you know, I'm not sure about that. Isn't it Facebook for professionals, whatever? You need a LinkedIn account. If you want to be relevant in the market and you want to get out there, that would be my first advice. The second part is spend some time understanding, you know, your experience. It's a really hard thing for people to do, to write a resume and write a profile, and you'd be surprised at how many people want to outsource it. But it's your information at the end of the day. And if you sit there and you go, actually, what have I done? I've done some really great stuff. Okay, so cool. I'm going to jot that down. Of course, you've got your client name, your company, but it's really about what you put in there. And you don't need to go overboard. You need dot points, a couple of responsibilities, a couple of achievements with some tangible stuff in there. For example, I looked after the supply chain for Kraft Heinz for 2 years. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. As supply chain manager for Kraft Heinz, I reduced inventory by $5 million, improved supply performance by 73%, and got DIFOT to 99%. Now, a lot of people won't know what that means, but it sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes, very impressive.
And you know, that's what it is. You want to be specific. You know, whether it's marketing, whether it's engineering, you know, you've got to talk to your field, because that's what the search people are looking for. And, you know, you just need to be relevant. And you can't be all things to everyone. So people will, you know, when people go for an interview, sometimes they think they've got to be perfect for that job. You've just got to be you. And you've just got to talk about what you've done, because you've done some really great stuff, and people will then draw the synergies from that and go, okay, that makes sense, because we need to reduce our inventory. They go, okay, we're struggling with DIFOT. We need to rationalise our supplier base. So you just need to be the best version of you. You need to be the best version of you on paper, because it is a candidate-rich market. So taking that time and elevating yourself on paper goes a long way.
Just briefly, keywords in LinkedIn. How important is that?
Very important.
So tell us a little bit. What's a keyword?
So the LinkedIn search algorithm is done on keywords. Okay, for example, you don't want to have in your title material manager for aftermarket parts, ANZ, you know, Australasia. whatever, too many words. You get what I'm saying? You want to be, nice and because it takes the keyword search. And everyone, whether it's clients, direct, recruiters, are doing a Boolean search. So they're grabbing keywords. So they're going to grab your title, they're going to grab your industry, and they're going to grab anything specific. So again, that example I used before, if Murray Goulburn is looking for a supply chain manager, and that Kraft Heinz example I gave, they're going to go supply chain manager, FMCG, and we want someone to reduce inventory. So if you've got those keywords in your profile, bang, you're going to come up front and center, which is great. Now, you don't have to make your profile active or open for opportunities or anything like that, but you just need to have a profile.
Yep. Thank you. Do you use any other social media?
No, not in our space. Now we use LinkedIn, we use Seek, we use Seek Premium, we use our database, and we use our network referrals. They're the ones in our industry. Now, if you're in digital, if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, it's very different. But we're operations, we're the back of house. We're the introverts at the back. So we're a bit more conservative, but in terms of other industries, again, you'd have to talk to your recruiter specific and see, how you could elevate your profile on those platforms.
You often hear it said, be careful what's on Facebook because employers look there.
Yeah.
What's the level of truth in that statement from your perspective?
Very limited. People are people. People take, people on face value. They spend enough time in the interviewing with them. They conduct reference checks. It's very rare that people are going to that, the social media platforms. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but, as I said, people are people.
So, in this world of modern technology, what role does the simple CV play, if any, today?
A huge amount.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still. So every time we'll present, say 5 candidates on a shortlist, and we'll have 5 CVs. Now, going back to how I said we think the right way to do business is in recruitment and in life, it's face to face. So we bring the CVs down, we'll bring the shortlist down, bounded, we'll talk through each person, and they'll have that as the reference point. So CVs are still very relevant. It gives you a snapshot of who you are, what you've done. It gives you a chance to sell yourself on paper, and that's what most people are reviewing.
So is that relevant to the whole recruitment game? Doesn't matter what area, it's just standard that CVs still matter?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then that leads into the next question about the bots. What truth is there that, large chunks of CVs run through the scanner or the robot to pick out keywords? Does that truly happen or not so much?
No, it's not. It's not happening. It's not happening in Australia, because then you wouldn't have a large portion of our workforce in HR. There'd be no need. There's a big movement in recruitment to say technology is going to take over our job. But until AI can conduct an interview or tell a gag or talk about someone, it goes back to your first question. Can you talk about someone? Can you use your own emotional intelligence to find out about them? When you asked me to tell me about myself, the first thing I led off with was, my family. And that's a rhetoric people always forget. You go to work, you spend more time at work than you do with your own family. So you want to know that you're not a goose. That there is something behind, the words on the paper. Until everyone wants to employ robots, I think, I think the interview and the resume is still going to be pretty relevant.
Sure. So what does a good CV look like?
Yeah, structured, succinct, dot points, name, education, any professional certifications, executive summary, 2 sentences. Role, tenure, as in, so 2017 to current, client, sentence on the client, responsibilities, 6-7 dot points, achievements, 2-3 dot points. Tangible information.
Tangible.
Not throwaway lines. Again, I'll give you an example. I look after the inventory for Australia and New Zealand. What does that mean? I look after 7 depots of $13 million of inventory across Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales, with a freight matrix that covers the national footprint. Again, you might not know what I'm talking about, but you get that there's substance to it and there's a throwaway sort of generic line. You know, I lead and develop a team of people. You know, what does that mean? You know, I lead these type of people in these type of roles across these type of disciplines. Again, you know, you can say something or you can peel back the layers and say it. And that's what will elevate you again.
So being specific, but also one of the things that you often hear, and psychology research supports this, is the power of numbers. Actually seeing a number quantifies action. Would probably sounds like you would agree with that.
100%. You know, if you're bringing some oomph or some, you know, it just sounds, you're very passionate, you're credible, they're just going to grab so much synergy from what you're saying, go, wow, he gets it. She gets it. You know, it's like then you'll start leaning in with the employer or the client interviewing and it'd be like you're almost talking about a secret. Like, oh, wow, how did you do that? Yeah, we do it this way. Oh, I shouldn't have done it that way. You know, and then you really, you know, you're on a winner.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. This has been awesome. Some really valuable information. Now, our last customary question. We ask this question of everyone. If you were to give just one tip to a professional looking for a new role or their dream job, from your perspective, what would that one tip be?
You are you. So you can only be you. People want genuine, authentic people. They want people who have a laugh. They don't want a robot. They want people who are real. So if you go in and say, do you know what, in that last role, I probably didn't do that right, that's okay. I don't know anyone who's got everything right in every role they've been in. You know, if you open up some vulnerability, you'll go a long way.
Fantastic. That's awesome. That's a really powerful answer about being yourself. Above all else, be who you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's podcast. If this podcast has inspired you to find happiness in your career, then I invite you to download my 9 key steps to finding my dream career from my website. And of course, I'd love to know what you think. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the Love What You Do podcast and write us a review. It helps other people find our community. And follow me on LinkedIn.